Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Wednesday, March 19th, 2025. Time to give this all another try and time to fumble our way through the use of Zoom once again. Greg and I experimenting in the background, and I think everything seems to be working. I finally found my way to all of his chat messages, so I'm going to be able to share the Rafto stories as he shares them with me. I think. I'm not certain how I got to that screen. I don't remember Zoom being this confusing when I've used it like 100 other times, but I don't know. Then I was organizing my own meetings and it was that much easier for some reason. Anyway, we still haven't figured out exactly the music sharing. Since he started the meeting, I thought that maybe he had to allow participants to share music, but when it does that, it cuts off all the rest of the sound for some reason. I don't know. We're working on it. I got some instructions from some people that maybe I need to share those instructions with Greg about the special setting that won't cut off sound if we share. We'll see if we can work it. In the meantime, I'll say, Greg, we're out of time. Stop talking. And then everything will work just fine. Seems to be working just fine on the stream. I get the thumbs up from Justice that we're A-OK and ready to roll, minus the fact that we have a wackadoodle president who is destroying American democracy. Beyond that, my computer seems to be working all right until they come and take it. All right, so it's been a bit of a weird start to the week. It feels like a Monday because this is Greg's first visit for the week, but it is in fact Wednesday. Things have been happening, but nothing good. Anyway, I see that, there's a number of top stories that we have to get to, and then some dumb ones. So let me see what's in the collection and see what else is out there. I saw an interesting story now being widely circulated right now. It's sort of the hot item of the moment on social media. The story in The Guardian of the inside story as told by the now thankfully released Canadian woman who made the papers the other day at having been snatched up at a border crossing, a routine border crossing with a work visa and everything, telling the story of how nothing mattered, I guess, about her situation when she was grabbed up by ICE just at an airport, arriving, going through what she thought was maybe some sort of routine questioning because she was coming in on a work visa, and kind of a harrowing tale. And she got the good kind of immigration story. The bulk of the story is her telling the horror story of being inside and that she was only there for a matter of days, whereas other people have been in this system for months. It's really something. It's a lengthy read. It's not huge, but something you should be reading. I don't think it's, it could be a Good Friday story, I suppose, even though it's not Good Friday yet. But you've likely seen it pass around. If you have seen the Guardian story, I'm the Canadian who was detained by ICE for 2 weeks. It felt like I had been kidnapped. Grab it. It will be well worth your time. You'll be, I guess, grotesquely fascinated by what went on in there. And it makes you nervous, and it makes you wonder about some stories of some of the other people who have been snatched up just making routine mistakes at the border, including one group who was, traveling where they were inside the United States and they're down in a southern border crossing area and accidentally got in the lane for exiting and going to Mexico. They never did exit. They tried to leave the line and they were snatched up. And, pretty crazy. And they said, we don't have our passports with us because we weren't thinking about leaving the country. I guess they were Canadian originally. And, our passports are at the hotel room because we weren't leaving today. But you got in the line to leave and then you left and that looks fishy. And so you end up, getting, whatever, man, just thrown in the tank for whatever reason. Okay. There's also some other things that we have to clear up, some stories to revisit yesterday that it turns out there's more detail on, so that we didn't get the story exactly right because we went with the half-assed approach yesterday. letting people who were telling tall tales for their own reasons and jumping to conclusions and sharing them on social media. We shared the fact that we had seen this thing shared, but it wasn't an authoritative report. Long story short on that one, Dropkick Murphy's story seems to be slightly different than we originally anticipated. We'll get to that later, but Greg Dworkin is here, and now there's no ringy-dingy signal
Yeah,
anymore.
I just unmute my mic and just jump in.
You just say, hey, I'm here.
Hey.
Ding, ding. Good morning, Greg. How are you?
Yeah. Ding, ding, ding.
We'll just pretend you're here. I'll just change the opening. We'll just say, I don't know what's going to happen.
I know. I'll start my washing machine so you can hear some music.
Right, and then we'll have to get sponsorship music payments from the jingle, the company whose jingle is displayed when you.
Right.
All right. Well, good morning.
Funny company. Actually, it's the jingle is like all my appliances have the same jingle.
Yeah. So are they all like what GE appliances or something, or one brand?
LG. Yeah.
LG.
Right. Yeah. So the washing machine, the dryer, the dishwasher, and the refrigerator all sing to the same tune.
All right. Well, it's a nice tune.
So they probably have majority in Congress and can barely pass stuff, but still pass it.
When
they're
it
all on the same page.
Okay. Well, here's your first crack at the week so far.
Okay. So we're going to start with something silly, but I just thought it's people care about this for reasons which perplex me. So I'll just mention it and then we'll move on. And that is that more JFK assassination stuff was released yesterday.
Sort of.
And it turns out there's really nothing in it that we didn't already know, except for people's names and the fact that the CIA was really into trying to infiltrate European capitals, which is part of the reason why all this stuff is redacted.
European capitals, huh?
Yeah, well, I mean, the CIA claimed they had more agents in Paris than the State Department did.
I see. So rather than embarrass ourselves or the French.
So that stuff was redacted for 50 years because oh, really? I sort of suspected that. But now we know.
Yeah, I see. Now that we no longer care whether the French like us and we're leaving NATO, we can embarrass them all by saying we had more agents in your capital than you thought.
Yeah, we were trying to influence
none of whom saw JFK or anything about this. Just wanted to
report. And this has nothing whatsoever to do with the JFK assassination, of which there's absolutely no new information.
So there's lots of new entries. You know who didn't see anything at the assassination because they were spying in Paris? John Smith. Oh. Yeah. All right. Well, redact that, John Smith.
There is one vaguely interesting thing here, and that is that the JFK papers cite an award for spying.
Oh.
Given to a fellow named James McCord, who you vaguely may find that name familiar because he was one of the Watergate burglars.
Oh. Yeah, okay. Well,
hello.
He's like the
that's nice.
Yeah, like Forrest Gump of clandestine activities.
Yeah, well, here's my here's my cred. Here's my credentials. I actually was a spy.
Spy of the month.
So,
you just can't tell anybody.
Yeah,
and then
he had somebody else's picture on the wall, under Spy of the Month because you can't show my picture. So
right.
Here's Groucho Marx.
So he had won an award for his spying by investigation of assassination time, but he didn't have anything to do with it. But then, 10 years later,
anyway,
he did have something to do with it. But
RFK Jr. is the more interesting Kennedy, but really not a lot on him right now. The main thing, and I think, believe it or not, Axios had a good piece on this. But the main thing, and the title of my pundit roundup today was the constitutional crisis just over the horizon has, in fact, arrived.
Hey, congratulations. Welcome, constitutional crisis. We've been waiting a long time for you. Strike up the band.
So some people ask questions. The Economist says, did Donald Trump willfully defy a court order? The administration's rush deportation of alleged gang members seems to have crossed a line.
Oh.
Now, here's the thing. If you ask normies, if you had a Venezuelan crime member of a gang, known violent gang, in your town, if you did, would you like to see them deported? And I would suggest that even without having done the poll, the answer to that would probably in the 90% yes.
Yeah, right. If you follow that as a given, what do you want to do about it?
The problem is that without due process, the Trump administration can point to somebody with tattoos and say, oh, he's a Venezuelan gang member.
Right.
Well, actually, that guy grew up in Yonkers, New York, as an American citizen, and his family's been here for 3 generations. No, he's a Venezuelan, and I'm sending him to El Salvador because I say so, because he has tattoos. There's your proof.
Yeah.
And so without due process, the administration can claim anybody is a Venezuelan gang member and do anything to them. And that's the problem. Yes. And they say, yeah, well, too bad for you. We're doing it anyway. That's Tom Homan. Aha. So that's why when the court said, no, you got to turn these people around because you didn't follow due process, the administration said, oh, it's too late. They're already in the air. You only gave us a verbal and not a written order. They had already crossed the international date line. So it was yesterday. Yeah. And we're not paying attention to you. And besides, I have pencils in my ears.
Yeah. And there's gold fringe on your flag in the courtroom, so you're not all sorts of ideas, none of which are actually operative parts of the law.
Right. None of them. NBC's take, and just to give you an idea of how ubiquitous this is, because everybody's writing this up, we're not stopping. Trump officials raise the stakes and show down with judges. Trump's claiming nearly limitless power through a campaign to delegitimize institutions that have long acted as checks on the presidency. So they take a slightly 10,000-foot view of all of this. It's not the specifics, it's the generality of trying to delegitimize the courts. But Axios is even more specific. Inside Trump's supreme plot on immigration. Trump officials are basically trying to push this to the Supreme Court as quickly as they can, and they see at least 5 questions, detailed below, that they hope
more than usual
the Supreme Court will answer. Now, as a sidebar, interestingly, Trump also went off on the judge who told the planes to turn around, suggesting that he be impeached. And he probably didn't know that it takes like 2/3 to do that. And so it's impossible.
Maybe
because
he's
even with Schumer voting with
Yeah.
Republicans, they still don't have enough Democratic votes.
Maybe he's now refined his understanding of impeachment, and he's specifically saying, I want him impeached but not removed from office.
Well,
he's now a sophisticated consumer of impeachment news.
That got John Roberts on stage saying, you can't do stuff like that.
Oh, well.
So
nice knowing you, John.
if he's counting on John Roberts at the Supreme Court, I'm not sure they're on solid ground. But then again, I don't think anything they're doing is on solid ground. But in any case, Trump officials see 5 questions. Yeah. And I don't think they have Barrett. So I think it's 5-4 against them, because I think the other people are like useless.
Yeah.
Why it matters.
Roberts and Coney Barrett enjoyed law school. And so
the others. Brett Kavanaugh basically was having a beer.
I don't know what happened. I woke up when I was a judge.
Alito and Thomas are corrupt, and I never understand Gorsuch.
Yeah. Oh.
I don't get that guy.
Yeah, I don't know. Got some weird mom issues, I think.
Anyway. Well, he's really good on tribal issues and nothing else.
Yeah. Well, once he was. If he did it twice, that would be a pattern, I guess.
Yeah, well, he's done it more than once. He's done it more than once. So why it matters, Trump's plan, says Axios, revolves around 2 cases in obscure laws that have ignited lawsuits and sent shockwaves through the immigration system over successive weekends. He invoked the Alien Enemies Act of 1798 to deport accused Venezuelan gang members without immigration hearings. Without those hearings, you don't know that they were gang members. You have to take their word for it. I call foul.
Yeah. Alien babies, like tabloids.
Yeah. And the Alien Enemies Act of 1798, I think, is what was used to intern Japanese Americans in World War II. Right. And that was, in fact, a disgrace.
Yeah. Widely viewed as a tremendous miscarriage of justice. But let's do it again.
Well, yeah. So let's not.
Oh.
And then they used the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1952, McCarthy era, to detain pro-Palestinian activist Mahmoud Khalil, who helped lead protests at Columbia University.
Okay, I hadn't seen that citation.
The administration says the courts have little say over Marco Rubio's determination that Khalil should be deported as a national security risk. So between the two cases, Trump administration officials and their allies see 5 questions they'd like to put before the Supreme Court. One, does a peacetime president have the right to deport non-citizens under the Wartime Alien Enemies Act, even if there's no declared war?
No.
Should a single federal judge in a district court have the power to block a president's deportation program nationwide? They had no problem with a federal judge blocking Biden's student loan program.
Right. If a Pristone or anything like that, all of a sudden they've just discovered that single judges have powers.
Judge Kaczmarek doesn't exist, right?
Yeah.
Number 3, can that federal judge's order extend to international waters and demand the plane full of deportees turn around mid-flight? Yes. The judge says, my powers of execution do not stop at the U.S. border.
Well, the people flying the plane are not non-government employees once they leave the country. They're still employees. I'm ordering the people to turn the plane around.
Does a green card holder like the former Columbia student Khalil have speech rights that protect him from deportation, or can the Secretary of State unilaterally declare his speech adverse to U.S. foreign policy interests because the government alleges it aligns with the terror group Hamas?
Yeah.
So it's a free speech question.
Might be a bad answer on that one.
Number 5, can the Secretary of State's power to deport immigrants based on foreign policy concerns extend to so many student visa holders that colleges won't be able to admit foreign exchange students? So when you broaden the concept, a senior Justice Department official told Axios, every single non-citizen who actively supports Hamas is subject to a determination by Secretary Rubio that they lose their status. Our end game is all hands on deck trying everything. Everything we're doing, we're gaming out how the Supreme Court gets to decide. And our legal attack plan, we want to push the court, ultimately the Supreme Court, to take a stand. And we're trying to get clarity, and we're not putting all our eggs in one basket. That's why we're doing everything and throwing it against the wall and see what sticks.
Okay. That's, that's a logical approach to an illogical end.
But that's why you have to fight them at every turn.
Yes. Well,
that's why it's important that, for example, they said that Voice of America doesn't exist anymore. And the Voice of America people said, that's funny, we're continuing to broadcast.
Oh, are they?
Because your statement was illegal and we're challenging you in court. And in the meantime, we're broadcasting every day.
That's something. I didn't realize that they were actually still broadcasting. I mean,
that's what they said.
That's nice. I appreciate that. Several of these agencies that have been closed are beginning, well, a lot of them are beginning to win their cases, and a lot of people now sort of now realizing, the actual thing that I should be saying is your order is illegal, and not only am I suing, I'm going back to work. And we've had some small independent agencies attempt to keep dodgy people out. That hasn't actually gone all that well, but it does delay the action. But apparently now you can, if you call the police to help you keep the trespassers out, they sometimes bring them in. That's weird.
Yes.
I have some new information on that one. We'll do later.
So,
So that sucks.
It does. And Axios says one of those other plans that they have is interesting. They are planning on stripping U.S. citizenship from naturalized Americans.
Oh, all right. I think that's good. We're just going to take it back. I take that back. We swore you in with crossed fingers.
Mike Davis, a close White House ally, said, you're going to have Hamas supporters who've been naturalized, and so they're eligible to lose their status as citizens because we say so.
All right. Great. Well,
on the other side, the civil libertarians say this is all awful. It's all kinds of awful. The government's action constitutes a profound threat to free speech on university campuses and beyond. Law professors Elan Arulanatham and Adam Cox wrote last week in Just Security, a law and policy journal. Yeah. I apologize if I mispronounced Cox. They wrote that freedom of speech on campuses was already on life support after aggressive measures university had taken to discipline and discourage Palestinian groups. Behind the scenes, Trump's effort is spearheaded by Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller. That tells you everything you need to know.
Right.
Trump's administration's counting on a Supreme Court with 6 of the 9 members appointed by Republicans, and this high court typically has tried to avoid immigration disputes, and the administration wants to force them to decide.
Well, they might not like the outcome of that one. Right. I hope, we'll see. But yeah, it's quite scary. Can we challenge the citizenship and then the subsequent birthright citizenship of anybody who we can find out and establish attended the American Bund rally at Madison Square Garden? Not Trump's, but the original one with the original Nazis, since they obviously were endangering the national security of the United States at the time and swearing allegiance to a foreign government. Though they were American born, we should strip them of their citizenship, and all of their descendants should be on shaky ground. And some of them are probably in the administration right now.
Well, I don't even know what to say. The idea that District Judge James Boasberg, who was the one who called for the planes to turn around, was being threatened by Trump.
Right.
And then some House Republicans, or headline-hungry House Republicans, as Axios called them, used this as another chance to show their fealty to Trump. They promptly proposed a bill to impeach Boasberg. The measure's doomed to fail in the divided House, and it couldn't possibly get past the Senate in any case. So impeachment is impossible, and they have to know that, and they're doing it anyway.
Yeah.
And it's bad. It's all bad. So that's, setting up the constitutional crisis that we find ourselves in. This is headed to the Supreme Court. And I think Roberts is going to come down on the right side. I think Amy Coney Barrett's going to come down on the right side. I'm not worried about the three liberals on the court. And the other four, of course, Alito and Thomas will agree with it. I mean, that's a given.
Yeah.
Kavanaugh and Gorsuch probably will agree with Trump because they're Kavanaugh and Gorsuch, but there's always a chance that Roberts can convince them.
Yeah, that's true. It's a coin toss sometimes on those two guys.
But even 7-2 is terrible. It should be 9-0.
Right. Yeah. That we shouldn't be having this conversation. It should be pretty obvious to everybody who, graduated to law school, whether they liked it or not.
That's what I say every time I dial you up on the show. We shouldn't be having this conversation, but here we are, and we're going to do it for an hour anyway.
Well, now we shouldn't be having it because we could be deported for having it. But
right.
At any rate, not quite yet. But
anyway,
this is gonna come to a head fairly soon, and I mean, I don't know. I guess they will be threatening impeachment regularly for everybody. I mean, and I guess it's possible at some point Elon Musk might say, I might fire justices and we'll have a smaller Supreme Court.
You've seen the so-called immigration czar, Tom Homan. I actually don't know what his official title is.
That's a good question.
I guess he's at the DHS. All I know is every time I see him on TV speaking, I think to myself, that's Frank Nitti.
Mm-hmm.
And if you think of him as Frank Nitti, everything else he says makes a whole lot more sense.
Yeah, his whole shtick, I mean, he got the job because he was going to be willing to get on TV and say crazy, tough talk. Oh, we're going to chop everybody's head off.
Right. Rolling Stone handles it as thusly: move fast inside Team Trump's furious defiance of the courts. Trump's advisors are attacking judges for daring to control him. The president wants the one objecting to his deportation plans to be impeached. We've talked about the fact that that's impossible. This isn't the first time Trump and his top brass suggested they don't have to follow court orders. J.D. Vance wrote last month, judges aren't allowed to control the executive's legitimate power. After a different judge ordered Trump administration to hire back some of the thousands of probationary federal employees,
right,
he and his billionaire advisor Elon Musk fired without basis, Bondi complained, you got one district judge thinking he can control the money for the entire country. Yeah, well, yes, because they're a judge.
Yeah, the federal kind. You know how it is with federal stuff.
Right. So, interestingly, again, I mentioned that the Voice of America is still broadcasting.
Yes.
Both at, and see if I can remember both places, NIH and one other agency, FAA.
Oh.
Both rehired probationary employees they were told to fire based on a court order. So they appear to be complying with that. So there is resistance.
There are several others, I think.
Yes. And so there are resistance at some of the individual agencies. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yes.
And so it'll be interesting because they say, well, we're not listening. Well, your agencies are listening. Oh, well, let us know who they are because we'll get around to doing something. Well, you've got a lot of things on your plate. You're that guy in Ed Sullivan spinning the plates, and I'm not so sure that you've got everything covered.
That's a good point, and that's an excellent. We should reiterate that for resistance purposes. I know it feels sometimes like it's all futile. Resistance is futile, as they say. You might feel like you're banging your head against the wall, but if 10 people are doing it, they can't stay on top of all that. So let's make it whack-a-mole for them. If the dodgy boys are spending all their time going out and refiring people that they thought they fired the first time, they're 19. They may get frustrated and go home.
Well, they've got other things on their mind. They've got to go after the Tesla protesters, which are really working quite well around the world.
And they're starting, they're trying their best. Pam Bondi has some prosecutions teed up.
Yes, but the Tesla stock is tanking, and people are setting Teslas on fire all over the world.
Teslas are setting Teslas on fire.
Yeah,
I think it's spontaneous. I don't know that anybody's helping them along.
Right.
I can't swear.
Spontaneous combustion.
I don't know. Yeah. Right. It's been happening. Those batteries are volatile, and what can you do?
Right.
But yes, the stock price is tanking. There are major institutional investors here and abroad that are dumping all of their shares. There are insiders at Tesla that are dumping all their shares. So it's been quite a drop. So far, that doesn't bother him too much because $300 billion is an awful lot of billions. Right. It's a lot of dollars.
So remember, Popat Ken White wrote told Rolling Stone last week, the people in the administration who are deliberately violating a court order and instructing others to ignore it is criminal contempt of court and potential obstruction of justice. It's not just lawless, it's a crime.
Hi everybody, this is Scott Anderson, your summary guy. Were you looking forward to an egalitarian democracy free of bigotry, misogyny, racism, and greed, where people of different appearances, belief, and heritage had a right to live without fear, and everyone could expect a basic level of health, stability, and safety throughout their life? Well, too bad. The plain fact is that we're heading in the wrong direction. And where we once had a voice in such things, increasingly we don't. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. However, if you're looking to join people who understand today's issues and can intelligently address the reality of today from your point of view, you can join us at Kagro in the morning. As you know, there aren't many of us out there, at least compared to them. We need to stick together, and by that I mean send us money. That is contributions to patreon.com, secure, reoccurring contributions. Those contributions keep this show in the air and us together. We've been through a lot together. The temporary loss of the presidency, we hope. The temporary loss of the House, the Senate, the Supreme Court, we hope. Face it, we are pretty much all that we have left. Remember, we couldn't do it without you, and you shouldn't do it without us. We're in this together, so thanks.
All right, welcome back to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. There was this terrific soliloquy in the middle of the break, but I think you all got where we were going. Right before we actually broke off, you were making the very correct and important point about that big red line is approaching, and actually most of the debate in the Democratic side is how quickly it's approaching and whether where that line is and whether we've already crossed it.
We're standing on the line.
Yeah,
I don't know if we've crossed it or not, but we're certainly standing on that line.
Yeah, it's only in question whether or not we've crossed it because we do have. Well, I think Chuck Schumer addressed it directly in the last couple of days, saying that basically he views the line as, well, if Trump defies the Supreme Court, that's the line. Other people
ridiculous.
Are saying any court. Really.
Any court.
Yeah.
Which is why Chuck Schumer has to go. And let me have a word about Chuck Schumer.
All right.
He may be correct about the idea that a shutdown would actually be worse for the country because that would allow Trump to decide what's
I can't
essential.
Promise that that's not true.
Right. But he might be right.
We debate it.
It is possible that he's right about that.
Yeah.
He is completely wrong about the politics of it. I don't think he understands the politics. And to give you an example of how I don't think he understands the politics, in order to defend his position, he elected to have an interview with the New York Times and go on The View.
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, I guess that seemed normal.
Do you think that wins elections? I mean, these are the people who are already voting for you. I don't understand what he's doing. He's not explaining what he's doing to people who need to hear it. And so that's the next segment that I want to talk about.
I guess it depends on what we mean. What is he trying to save himself from? I suppose if he's talking to Democrats,
he wants to stay leader. Because,
that's how
Democrats are murmuring that maybe we need a new leader.
Yeah, so he goes on shows and talks to Democrats where the normie audience that he thinks is everybody.
Those aren't the votes he needs. He needs votes from his caucus.
Yeah. Although they're read the New York Times and watch The View.
Still, they're upset with him.
Yes.
And they look at him and say, what, you're going on The View? Have you ever heard of TikTok?
Oh, well, I don't know if any of them have heard of it.
Well, they
TikTok.
have.
They almost banned
the younger
it.
Ones. I hate to make it generational, but if I have to explain to you what social media is, maybe you're not the messenger.
Now, that could be the case. That's entirely possible. I have my doubts about whether the older generation of Democratic senators knows what's. I mean, the last time they heard about TikTok, it was, weren't we banning that, and weren't we trying to, hide from the glaring lights and join Republicans in banning it, but then it got unbanned or something.
I am over 70, and if you want to call me ageist, you go right ahead. But I'm telling you that if people like Schumer and Dick Durbin and other people think that the way to reach America and persuade them is to go on The View and have an interview with New York Times, and that's all, they're missing what's going on with real people. And so that's what I want to talk about next.
Oh, all right. We have time for that.
Real people.
Ready? Yeah. Okay. And I do think that they do think that, although they have some, I'm sure he's aware, both of them would say, oh, yes, my grandkids told me about the TikTok thing.
Yeah, the TikTok thing. I heard that from my grandson. Yes, I get that.
We're supposed to do that. Well, let me tell you, everybody, we're working very hard for America. Right. Okay. So put that on the TikTok.
So it isn't your chronological age. It's your
fair enough.
Your tech savvy age that is of concern to me.
Sure. I think that's.
And this isn't 1980, and I don't really care if your tactics work in 1992.
Right. Well,
this is 2025 and requires a different approach.
You're supposed to hire people for that.
New York Times. This is Kristen Soltis Anderson, Republican pollster. Very good. And she writes, Trump's poll numbers are sagging, and here is the key reason.
Oh, all right.
And she points out that he's gone from favorable to unfavorable. And on average, his unfavorables or job approval is starting to drop and has been rather precipitously. And we know, we've discussed this on the show, that, for example, in economic issues, he's lower than at any point, even in his first presidency. We know that immigration is relatively holding up because most people, in fact, do want Venezuelan gang members out of their town, even if they don't understand that they don't have any Venezuelan gang members in
Let's get some and get rid of them.
Right. So she writes, the question reflects a central mystery of this presidency so far. And it is a mystery. And I want to talk about it with a follow-up Washington Post article.
All right.
Are Mr. Trump's actions in step with what voters want from him? Or is he going rogue on America, doing his own thing? Polls be damned. Courts be damned. Everything be damned. Did people want him to remake the government and disrupt the global financial order? Throw, she didn't write this, but I'm adding it, throw Ukraine under the bus, make Europe go its own separate way, show fealty to Putin, make sure the Middle East is on fire. Is that what people elected? Or, as she writes, did they just want cheaper groceries? How people see and judge that will help determine his ultimate success or failure in office, as well as the chances of the Republican Party securing its policy agenda in years to come. Mr. Trump seems to view his job differently than voters, which is one reason for his falling poll numbers. He strongly believes he was elected to return to Washington as a disruptor, this time with significantly more experience and effectiveness than in his first term. That's an interesting thing for him to write, because the Harris people and the Harris voters and people like me and people like you said that if he is elected to return to Washington, he's going to be a disruptor, and this time with significantly more experience and effectiveness than in his first term.
I feel like,
and I feel like most voters heard that and said, "Nah, look, you keep saying he's a crook and that he's bad and that he's going to do bad things. I didn't see that in his first term, and I don't care. Groceries are too expensive, and I'm voting for him anyway."
Yeah. By the way, I saw that in his first term.
Yeah. So I mean, we all agree that was the case. So he's got a point when he says, well, people know that and they voted for me anyway.
Yeah. I mean,
he sees himself as bringing strength back to the Oval Office after 4 years of a weak Joe Biden. He interprets authoritarianism as strength. In this, he believes he has a latitude to go big and bold, create turbulence, and cause prices to rise in the short term as he asserts himself in Washington and around the globe. It's important to make everybody hate me and tank the economy because that shows me that I'm strong.
Well, if that's the belief, you're doing great.
But she writes, as I dug into Mr. Trump's polling data, it looks increasingly that American voters' mandate to the president was more narrow than that. After a prolonged period of inflation with a Biden administration that told Americans not to believe their lying wallets, voters clearly wanted the next president to stabilize the economy and make the cost of living more manageable. Mr. Trump and his cabinet officials have warned America we're doing things the hard way. Access to cheap goods isn't a priority. And in doing so, they're asking the country to absorb short-term pain.
Yeah. Everyone loves pain.
In order to get long-term gain.
Well, I mean, it's a theory.
It's a theory. So without a clear, consistent vision for what Americans will get for their upended government or pricier groceries, Trump team may quickly find the goodwill of the public running out, especially the swing voters who rewarded Mr. Trump and Republican candidates with their support and the expectation of economic progress. Presidents have misread their mandates in the past, seeing what they want rather than what's going on. The best argument for Mr. Trump's belief that he was elected with a broad mandate to bring about aggressive change is that he never pretended he'd do otherwise.
Okay.
Which is true, but people didn't vote for higher prices.
Right. They, I think, largely preferred the lower idea.
Right.
Right. And by the way, only about a month until everybody realizes the eggs are too expensive for Easter.
Right.
But,
So Kirsten Soltis Anderson says, my polling showed that over 80% of voters believed he would impose new tariffs, far higher than many other policies that Mr. Trump has pursued. But even if Americans knew what they were getting with things like tariffs, that doesn't answer whether they voted for him because of those things or in spite of those things. In other words, you have to assume Americans know what tariffs are.
Well, that's not a great
answer that question, and that what kind of effect it's going to have on grocery prices.
No, I don't think that.
I don't think that's very relevant because, I know he wanted tariffs. What are tariffs? Well, I don't know.
He told me they were something completely different, and I didn't know.
He said that they were a tax on other countries. I like that.
Yeah.
But that's not what it is.
Oh, and by the way, they are a tax on other countries. I thought he said they're a tax on other countries, and I love attacking other countries.
Right. Especially
There's
the
also
ones
that.
I don't like.
I don't even know, which ones thought which was going to happen. But they knew he was promising tariffs, and so therefore, blah blah blah. Well, they knew that, but they did not know what tariffs were because he was telling them they were the opposite of what they actually are.
Right. Shortly after the inauguration, I asked American voters how much of a priority they thought a range of policy moves should be for Mr. Trump. Top of the list, reduce the cost of living. But also high up on the list were actions in immigration, which explains why polling has found that Mr. Trump's immigration job approval remains positive, even as he's tanking everywhere else.
Yes, and it's going to take a little while longer for some of the stories to sink in. Every day there's a new one of, I voted for it and I wanted that and I still want it. It's just that I'm getting something different. I thought he was going after others, but it turns out it's me.
That's why I want to follow up with the Washington Post story about how federal workers feel about what he's doing.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
That's exactly in that category.
That's a local story for us.
In any case, past presidents who tackled the wrong topic at the wrong time have led their party to electoral defeat. George W. Bush, for example. Ultimately, just as Mr. Trump is preparing voters to accept short-term pain for the promise of long-term gain, his party may be willing to accept short-term political pain if it believes it can secure a long-lasting global economic framework and a dismantling of the bureaucratic state. Republicans may feel that once the initial bite of tariffs and government disruption have passed, voters will ultimately side with their view. My view is they're stupid. They don't understand how unpopular they're, they sort of do, which is why they're doing it by fiat. And then they think, well, but people will just come around. They're stupid. They're also mean-spirited, but they're stupid.
Yeah. Well, they have a couple of snippets of differing theories to grasp at. They might be convincing themselves, sure, like with the Affordable Care Act or even Social Security, et cetera, there was an initial backlash against it, but eventually people came to
and that's exactly what they think, and
it.
That's what she writes up. That's exactly her words.
Oh.
The Affordable Care Act proved too difficult for Republicans to uproot because it was enshrined in law by Congress. The problem is Trump is doing a lot of things with executive order.
Right. He just thinks if it happens and sticks for long enough, people will say, I love it, let's pretend it's law.
So Republicans are taking what she calls a let's just do it and be legends mindset. But the number one issue in America remains the number one issue, and there are real political risks to a strategy that has voters to grin and bear it in the checkout line for a promise of something better tomorrow. I would include in that slashing Medicaid, because then people are going to, and Social Security and Medicare, and people are going to realize that, hey, that affects me.
Yes.
So that's why I say they're stupid.
Yeah. Well, there's all sorts of examples of it between that and you're deporting somebody that I liked.
Yeah.
You're deporting me. You're deporting my wife. I thought you were going after
I thought you were going after criminals. Right. Oh, well, you're a criminal. Well, why are you saying that?
What?
Because I don't like the way you do your hair.
Right.
It's a gang sign.
Oh, yeah. Right. I love by the way, that you mentioned the tattoos, that they decided a rose tattoo means you're in this specific gang from Venezuela, as opposed to
tattoos are now gang signs.
Tattoo as rose is like, I guess, one of the most common things they got going.
Well, we're deporting everybody 20 to 35 years old because tattoos.
Right. That's
so this is a piece in the Washington Post. Federal workers think Trump won't improve their agencies, even his voters.
Okay.
But, don't take heart from that. They still like him. A post-Ipsos poll finds a majority of current federal workers believe most of Trump's executive orders affecting their agency are illegal.
Yeah.
57% of current federal workers believe most or all of Trump's executive orders are illegal. 71% of federal workers are concerned that the government may not be able to function if large numbers of federal workers are laid off. By the way, this is somewhere in the piece. I don't have it right at my fingertips. It's something like 51% of federal workers voted for Harris and 30-something voted for Trump.
Yeah.
But here's one Air Force veteran, a woman who says, to be shitty to the people who are supposed to be implementing your agenda to treat us the way we've been treated is just ridiculous, said an Air Force veteran and longtime Defense Department employee who voted for Trump 3 times. She said she used to think the department was a great place to work and was proud to serve her country. Then came the mandate to be in the office 5 days a week, which made caring for her disabled child more difficult. Then the fork in the road offer, the request she sent 5 bullet points, totally patronizing, she said. The government could be more efficient, but we didn't vote for this, said the employee who, like other survey respondents, spoke on the condition of anonymity for fear of retribution.
Sure.
We did not vote for Elon Musk.
Oh, okay.
And here's the number exactly. Federal workers who were registered to vote, 51% voted for Harris, 38% for Trump, so my memory was semi-correct.
Yeah.
And then there was another guy that I wanted to interview. Most federal workers feel frustrated, scared, and angry, according to the survey. About a third feel hopeful, less than a quarter feel enthusiastic, but they're proud of their work. Despite most disapproving of Trump's performance and predicting he'll worsen the way they operate, 81% of workers say they're unlikely to voluntarily leave their positions. They're committed.
Yeah.
They think it's a good way to build a career. They like what they're doing. They're proud of what they're doing. About a fifth of current government workers say they're actively looking for another job.
I think it's larger than that, but okay.
Right. So there's another guy they interviewed, Patrick Whitecamp, 57, medical support assistant at a veterans hospital in Kansas City, Missouri. Basically, if you don't like what Trump is doing, you're anonymous. If you like what Trump is doing, you're willing to use your name.
Right.
As 3/4 of federal workers, 3/4 of federal workers who voted for Trump approve of what Musk is doing. 80% approve of Trump. Sometimes, as a surgeon, you have to cut the cure, said Patrick Whitecamp, 57, a medical support assistant at a veterans hospital in Kansas City, Missouri.
He's going to tell the surgeons at a hospital what to do as a surgeon.
For years, he said, politicians paid lip service to streamlining bureaucracy. One person is finally doing something about it, and people are complaining. I don't get it, he said.
I'm sure
I take care of my federal veterans every day. I take pride in what I do. If people don't have that pride, maybe they do need to be dojied.
Yeah, maybe. Or maybe.
And then, but this is the kicker.
Yeah.
Later, he said he learned that a friend and fellow veteran had lost his job because he was on probationary status, and that's not right, he said.
Yeah, that's not right. And by the way, it was fascism when Al Gore did it in reinventing government.
Right. But, the point is that unless it happens to me, good. Get rid of all those other. Wait, what do you mean it's one of my friends?
Yeah, what you're saying is that guy's a registered Republican.
Yeah.
I understand that very well.
In Missouri.
Yeah. I mean, just, you tell me that somebody says they should be doing this. Oh, wait a minute. They did it to somebody I know and it's bad. I understand now. You're a Republican. You don't understand things until they eat your face. Right. Got it.
So it's just really.
I don't get leopards. I don't understand them.
They understand that what he's doing isn't going to work, but they like him anyway.
Sure.
But they like him anyways. The part that I still struggle with that I just don't get. I don't understand.
He's failing very strongly.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So again, to put this in perspective, there's a couple of articles, one in Vox, one in the New York Times, which were interesting because they both interviewed David Shore, who is a data specialist.
Yeah,
who often says contrary things that people get annoyed about.
Yeah, but
it turns out that his analysis was mostly right, and so he's worth listening to.
Okay, I just saw my impression of it was seeing it in passing, like, oh boy, another guy with a book or a theory or a soccer mom's thing who's got something to sell. But maybe he's right.
The most authoritative election analyses do draw on a variety of different data sources, says Vox, including large sample polling, precinct-level returns, and voter file data that shows definitively who didn't vote. And those last figures become available only recently, way after the election. So the Democratic firm, the Democratic firm Blue Rose Research, and the other people who had them early are Nate Cohn in the New York Times, which is one of the reasons why their polling was so good. The Democratic firm Blue Rose Research recently synthesized such data into a unified account of Kamala Harris' defeat. Blue Rose did ad testing for Future Forward, the largest PAC supporting Harris, which had disputes on strategy with the campaign itself. Its analysis will command a lot of attention. Few pollsters boast a larger data set. The company conducted 26 million voter interviews in 2024.
Didn't ask me.
And the firm's leader, David Shore, might be the most influential data scientist in the Democratic Party. I spoke with Shore about his autopsy. We discussed the problems with the popular theory that Democrats lost because of low turnout. And before we get into the why Democrats lost, let's talk about how they lost. Which voting bloc shifted? Well, polarization on political engagement, Shore said. There's a bunch of different ways to measure this. How many elections you vote in, how important politics is to your identity. That's how closely you follow the news. But across all of those is a consistent story. The most engaged people swung toward Democrats between 2020 and 2024, despite the fact that Democrats did worse overall. In other words, the more you paid attention to the news, the more you paid attention to what's going on, the more likely you are to vote for Harris.
All right.
So when you talk about getting your message out to those people who were listening to messages, they heard what you said.
All right.
You persuaded them. They voted for Harris.
High five.
But the people who were least politically engaged swung enormously against Democrats, and that's how she lost. They're a group that Biden either narrowly won or narrowly lost 4 years ago, and this time they voted for Trump by double digits. And Shore says, I just think this is analytically important. People have a lot of complaints about how the mainstream media covered things, but I think it's important to know that the people who watch the news the most become more democratic. And the problem was basically this large group of people who didn't follow the news became more conservative.
Yeah.
And so Vox says, well, if they're not responding to mainstream media information, where they're getting their view on politics. And Shore says, well, most people have to balance their reaction to objective facts in the economy with their pre-existing ideologic belief. A strongly Democratic voter isn't going to switch to Trump because they're upset about high prices. So it's not surprising that people with the weakest political loyalties would be the most responsive to changes in economic conditions. Keep that in mind because there's another poll I want to tell you about.
All right.
People with the weakest political loyalties would be most responsive to changes in economic conditions. What that means, Shore doesn't say this, is me saying this, is that if you voted a certain way in 2024 because you thought something, that doesn't mean you're going to vote that way in 2025 or 2026. These are not
if you vote
consistent, solid Trump voters at all, nor are they solid, consistent Democratic voters.
All right.
They stick their finger to the wind and they change their mind for reasons that are well known to us because we covered it with a lot of interviews. You know, I didn't like Trump because he wasn't very good at covering up the hush money stuff. And if he's not competent on committing crime, why should I vote for him? You know, that sort of thing. People who are politically disengaged overwhelmingly listed the cost of living as the thing they were most concerned about. But politically disengaged voters went from being a roughly neutral group to favoring the Republicans by 15 points. And during the Obama era, this was a solidly Democratic group. So there's this long-term trend that goes beyond inflation. Our coalition has been transitioning from working class people to college-educated people. Working class people are voting Republican. We've heard that. So then you have to move beyond the why. But this shift in partisanship of politically disengaged voters has important implications. So the mantra was, if everybody votes, we win. But now, if everybody votes, we lose. And that's important to understand. But that was in 2024.
Yeah.
For the election. The reason I say that is that there is a different poll out, Atlas Intel, of all people. Atlas Intel turned out to be a very accurate pollster, even though a lot of us made fun of it during the election. Okay. And it's generally a Trumpy poll.
Okay.
But they had a poll out, which I saw this morning. I don't know exactly when it was done. March 12th, it looks like. And I will send you the link. But basically what it says is Trump job approval for people who didn't vote in 2024.
Trump job, okay. Yeah.
If you didn't vote in 2024, what do you think of Trump? These are the disengaged people. You know, if everybody votes, it's going to vote Democrat. But in 2024, it turns out that most of the disengaged people favored Trump by 15 points. So this group is more a barometer of what the Zeitgeist is. It's more a barometer of what the feels are. They didn't vote, so they didn't affect the election. But they're the ones who don't show up for midterms, but sometimes show up for general presidential elections. They didn't in 2024, but there's a huge group of people out there. And they're normies in every sense of the way. They hate politics so much they don't always vote. So Atlas Intel comes out with a poll on March 12th. Disapprove of Trump 83%. Approve 13%.
Oh.
These are not people who are going to be swayed by, but I'm a Republican, so I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. These are the sort of people who Trump won over in 2024, different slightly in the sense that they didn't vote, whereas the others did vote. But these are disengaged people who were just going by vibes. And Trump is down by 70 points with them.
Oh, my.
So when you go back to Kristen Soltis Anderson's point about, well, they're taking a risk that somehow Americans are going to be patient with the Trump approach, this poll says they're not very patient.
Okay.
And what matters to them? What things cost.
What do you know? That's funny.
Not defying the courts, not trans issues, not a lot of the things that Republicans like to run on and make noise about. This is what they care about. And the reason Republicans are running around making noise about all those other things is because this is what matters to people. I say this at 9:57.
Yes, this is true. Right. We got another minute or so before music begins. So fair game to say it at this point. But yeah, I guess something we'll want to carry over discussion. I imagine we'll be revisiting this and doing so. Well, probably tomorrow.
Yeah.
But
so I'll send you an image from the David. We haven't even done the New York Times one, but this is from the Vox piece. If everybody voted according to their data, Harris 47.6, Trump 52.4. That's a 4.8 Trump lead, greater than the actual election. So things have changed since 2024, and that's what the Atlas Intel poll tells us.
Okay. Let me see that one again. It's down at the bottom. All right.
Down at the bottom.
Okay. I want to take a.
Oh, I heard a ring.
Yeah, that's the alarm that says in 30 seconds we'll start the music, and then we'll have 30 seconds to get the hell out of here for the day. All right, so let me see. Okay, I can see the picture. I just have to figure out the new way of making it bigger so that I can see it. But that's a skill. Oh, there it goes. It's just kind of laggy. It works. Okay. And, but now I have to get back to the music screen. So I can only look at it for a second. Now our music has begun and we have the 30 seconds to wrap things up and get out of here. Okay, just so that you know. And we'll work this out at some point. I'm sure there's a way for you to hear the fabulous exit music. It's a good cue, and we grew used to it over the years, and now it's gone. But only temporarily, I hope.
We can adapt. We're not that old.
Okay, right.
Anyway, take care, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.
That sounds like a good idea, and we have that opportunity. Thanks, Greg. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio, and now we get to see what happens with all of the information that Greg sent me now that he is disconnected. I don't see the fabulous chat information that I had. I was thinking, the last minute or so of the show, I thought, let's run around and open up all of the links that he sent, because now all of a sudden all of the things that I was looking at before, and God help me, I'll never figure out how to get back to the chat we were having. And I stumbled upon it before. I wonder if now that he's gone and the meeting is over, that chat is somewhere, and the links now need to be resent at some point. And there are like two different methodologies for sending chat information back and forth, and unfortunately they're both labeled chats. One is the team chat, and then I don't know what they call the other chat, but the other chat is something that can happen during a call, and that's where he parks all the links. The team chat is something that is persistent and hangs around external to the existence of an actual Zoom meeting, but that's not where the links are. So I don't know. We'll see how many of them I can recover later on, and whether or not any of them are. I don't know. I still don't know how this is. I never thought Zoom was such a mystery, but now all of a sudden I didn't use the chat function all that often. All right. Well, we'll see whether we can straighten it out at some point before Greg walks away from the computer for the day. All right. So now we can tell you the other stories I was going to bring to your attention. Things I've mentioned earlier, things that are clarifying of earlier stories. It turns out, where can we find all of this stuff? Is this all that important? I'm not even sure. But somewhere along the line, were any of these things via Yeah. I can't. Once again, the other issue of trying to figure out what's parked in pocket that came from Blue Sky, which, offers no evidence in the pocket view of what the thing was about until I open them up. Okay. And here comes some of the things from the other chat being moved over. So you heard my plaintive cry for the links to be moved to the team chat, which I cannot understand. What is the team chat? What does it even exist for? I'm not sure. But I guess, so that there can be a persistent record. But why it doesn't open up you're in the middle of a meeting, you're not going to go looking for the other screen just so that your links can live longer. But I guess we are. I don't know. Zoom, I think, has not got it right in terms of user interface and ease of use. And certainly not the way Skype did. But of course, Skype we grew used to and was fairly easy and intuitive to use, and that's why they have to get rid of it. Something more complicated so that you will agree to use their AI guide to figure out how to use it, and then they can capture all your information. Okay, so here's the story, the update of the story of the thing I mentioned only in passing yesterday, the Dropkick Murphys story, where the story yesterday, as it was being circulated, was that the Dropkick Murphys had a St. Patrick's Day show and had said something about Elon Musk and Donald Trump. They don't like him. And that immediately afterward, the Twitter account for the Dropkick Murphys had been suspended, deleted, whatever. And isn't that awful? And isn't Elon Musk a liar for saying he was a free speech absolutist and then doing that? And wouldn't it be difficult for anybody to put their finger on what sort of politics Elon Musk actually had adopted? He's such an enigma, and you can't nail him down. And he's not to be pigeonholed because he's such a galaxy brain genius. Well, anyway, we all reached those conclusions regardless of what had happened to the Dropkick Murphys. But that was supposed to be additional evidence that we were right about that. And it isn't. Because I guess it probably should have occurred to us at some point. Well, if the Dropkick Murphys are such dedicated opponents of Elon Musk, what are they even doing on Twitter? And that probably would have put you on the right path. I know it always feels bad to have been fooled by something like this. But it's a constant reminder that things that you were at one point in life possibly entitled to believe were true, even without digging and checking the background. None of that is the case anymore, and you have to question everything and investigate everything. So yeah, one thing that might have occurred to you is, why are they on Twitter? And we should ask them that question. And I suppose if you go and you ask that question, and then you stumble into the reality underlying the situation, or you're a brilliant genius and you knew from the beginning this is probably not what's going on, it's probably something else. I suspect that there were fewer of those than there were people who stumbled into things. And then sometimes the job of, I don't know, whatever. Sometimes the role people take on at that point is, having stumbled into it, you then say, well, everybody knew this and I should, or nobody knew this and I discovered it. And rather than saying I accidentally discovered it, you might say, well, I am such a world-renowned skeptic that I investigated this immediately. I immediately spotted it as a problem issue, whereas the rest of you dummies didn't. I don't know. I'm not sure where on the spectrum this all falls. But one such investigation came out of the work of journalist Jacqueline Sweet. Shall I open up and find out currently? The Intercept, Guardian, Politico, Mother Jones, I guess freelance journalist who has been published in many of those places, and picked up on some of the cues here at some point. And I guess I'll join it mid-thread here when I saw this thing. She said at that point that I picked up on her story, she was adding new information. I emailed the band, and it may be that she had this suspicion or whatever, or she had heard somewhere else that this story wasn't quite right. She emailed the band, I guess, and asked maybe ask the question, if you're such opponents, what are you even doing on Twitter? And the answer is this: we broke up with him first. We quit Twitter in 2022 when he was only half a Nazi. Then someone else took our handle pretending to be our official account. So we filed a legal complaint to put a stop to that, which is why the account, Dropkick Murphys on Twitter, shows up as suspended. It's not, in other words, that Elon Musk took umbrage at something that they said yesterday and suspended them, but rather, that may also be the case. He may have heard what they had to say and got mad at them, but there was no account to suspend because the account had already been suspended because they had already left Twitter 3 years ago, and then somebody stole their handle and tried to pretend to be them. Okay, so that's fine. There's more other quotes from them saying, look, we pulled our account because we didn't want to be a part of that guy's empire. But if we were still on there, I'm sure he would have suspended us by now. That's probably true also. And then Jacqueline goes on to report that you can see on the Internet Archive that the Dropkick Murphys account was suspended back in June of 2024. And then comes the part where now, I found this out and you didn't, so everybody needs to listen to me. I am, again, begging staff reporters to learn basic X-tech literacy stuff. Did anyone reach out to the band? Unverified online rumors are not a good news source. And while that is true, I guess I would probably say this kind of story falls in that gray area of, yeah, but also who cares? I mean, in the sense, maybe as a journalist, if that's your livelihood, you want to check on all of those things. For normies like me, hey, somebody said the Dropkick Murphys said something bad about Elon Musk. I believe that. Hey, somebody said that the thing that was so bad got them suspended from Twitter. Well, that's probably not hard to believe either. Sure, fine. Well, do you want to circulate an incorrect story about Elon Musk, even though he is Elon Musk? I don't know. I don't want to circulate anything. I kind of wanted to move on to something else, and I am only vaguely aware of the Dropkick Murphys. Sounds like a plausible enough story. Who cares? At some level, yeah, I moved on about 20 minutes before you published your big story about your in-depth investigation, which involved calling the band and asking them, did you get suspended? I'm pleased to have the truth of it, I guess, but ultimately, not that interested, but, ultimately, I guess you always want to report a story that, no, it didn't come out. It wasn't the way we heard at first. Yeah, I'd rather have the truth too. Am I going to, pay you for your work? Nah. I don't really care to publish it, quite honestly. Glad you did it. That was nice. Now we know. All right. In other news that didn't quite work out to be the way we heard it the first time, and this one I think of somewhat more import, even though ultimately it didn't change a great deal about the nature of the story. There is this story from a source that I have never seen and can't vouch for, but maybe it's right and it offers a different perspective. It's Popville, P-O-P, Popville, V-I-L-L-E, the whole thing. What is popville.com? I don't know. There's an about section. You want to know anything about it? Because Popville is P-O-P, not like pop culture, but it stands for something. What does it stand for? Prince of Petworth. Popville chronicles the happenings in Washington, D.C.'s neighborhoods. And I guess this person lives in the Petworth neighborhood, about which I know, next to nothing. I'm not even certain I know exactly where it lies. I'm not a big neighborhoods of D.C. maven. But, I lived in a neighborhood of Washington, D.C. for some amount of time. And, Petworth wasn't it. But in case you were wondering, Wikipedia will tell you it is a neighborhood of Washington, D.C. located in Northwest D.C., which is, of course, where I happen to live. But it was further east of me, where I lived. I lived in the Adams Morgan section of town, way back. It's become a hot and trendy place, but it was pretty marginal when I lived there. But that's because I was living there as a younger person, and that's where people gravitate to, the more reachable rents. But Petworth is primarily along Georgia Avenue and Upshur Street, it says here, as well as a portion of 14th Street. The neighborhood is accessible via the Georgia Avenue Petworth Station on the Green Line of the Washington Metro. Well, anyway, this guy lives in Petworth, and he has apparently declared himself the Prince of Petworth, and because he's a D.C. neighborhood guy, has this local story. You remember yesterday we were reading about the situation at the United States Institute of Peace, and the story as we had been handed it was that as an independent organization, a independent nonprofit organization chartered by Congress but not within the executive branch, was nonetheless being besieged by the dodgy people who presumed that because it had something to do with the government, it fell under their purview, and wanted to get in and presumably access the computer system and use it to fire everybody there. However, not only was it an independent agency and something that existed outside of the executive branch, but it also owned its own building and the land on which the building sat. So there was really not much standing for the dodgy people to be allowed entrance. And so they fought and said, no, we're not going to let you in. And at some point, the police are called. The story, as we originally heard it, was that the USIP people may have called the police and said, there's somebody trying to break into our office. Granted, they're from the federal government, but they're not really authorized to enter these premises over our objection. There's just no jurisdiction for them here. And then that the police showed up, and instead of helping the building owners and landowners expel trespassers, they expelled the building owners and landowners from the building and left the doors open for the trespassers to get in. And we were wondering, why did that happen? Well, I don't know if that helps us understand why it happened, but there is at least one of the particulars that didn't go as planned. Then by yesterday evening, I started to see hints that the dodgy people, or at least the federal government behind them, had called the police to the scene saying, I don't know what, the building owners are the actual intruders, come and throw them out. But anyway, Popville has this different story. MPD has put out, that's the Metropolitan Police Department, the cops that got called, put out a statement. MPD statement on response to call for service at the United States Institute of Peace is the title of this article at Popville. Got it? All right. So let's see. Personnel from the Department of Government Efficiency, that's dodgy, accompanied by D.C. police officers, gained access to the U.S. Institute of Peace Monday after being turned away last week. That's a quote that starts off things from CNN. It was the one who reported that one. And then they had their commentary. A reader writes, "We see and hear crazy things that are now a daily occurrence in our government, sadly. Today," which was Monday, March 17th, "the aforementioned action was taken at the U.S. Institute of Peace on 22nd Street Northwest," which is not in Petworth. But anyway, we know current actions are very different from actions that we may have considered normal. There is no normal today. How and why is armed force being used in a non-federal institution, and much less on the streets of our city? ? Exclamation point. There's some emotion involved here. What does MPD and Mayor Bowser have to say about in response to this action? Have we crossed that imaginary line yet? Well, all good questions. Now we switch gears and enter the statement as issued from MPD. And, cop speak, you got to start this way. On Monday, March 17th, 2025, at approximately 4 p.m., the Metropolitan Police Department, MPD, was contacted by the United States Attorney's Office regarding an ongoing incident at the United States Institute of Peace, USIP, located at 2301 Constitution Avenue Northwest. The USAO, again, that's the United States Attorney's Office. We're talking about Ed Martin here. The USAO advised MPD that they had been made aware that at least one person was refusing to leave the property at the direction of the acting USIP president. I guess that's where we have it, and we forgot to use our sound effect. And I know there are fans of the sound effect out there, so want to make use of it when we can. So here's where this is interesting. So this does give us a different angle on this. One, that it wasn't USIP that called the cops to protect them, but rather the United States Attorney's Office, who had sent FBI personnel with the Dodgies and maybe federal marshals, and for some reason thought the local police were necessary as well. But the claim here, of course, is Trump says, I fired all of the people who work on the board of USIP, and I replaced them with a new acting USIP president, and I sent him along, and the new guy shows up like Edmure Tully here, showing up outside of River Run and ordering the Blackfish to give up the place. I was named acting USIP president, and I say all the people who actually work there need to leave. They wouldn't, or at least one of the people wouldn't, and so the U.S. Attorney's Office calls the police on them. It's a very weird thing. First of all, for the U.S. Attorney to have been apprised of the situation at all seems kind of odd, and for them to opt to call the local police about it when they have the FBI and federal marshals at their command, for whatever reason, they chose to go with the local cops. The USAO advised MPD that they'd been made aware of at least one person that was refusing to leave the property at the direction of the acting USIP president, who was, he said, lawfully in charge of the facility. That, of course, highly questionable. As we're finding out more and more we find this out more and more these days. More and more people are saying this all the time, that the executive order probably naming this person the acting USIP president may itself have been illegal. But the thing is, a piece of paper was issued, and that piece of paper claimed that this other person was the acting president of USIP, and so everybody has to leave, even if it was illegal. No, not even if it was illegal, but don't try to confuse the cops with that. The USAO, the U.S. Attorney's Office, provided the contact information for the, so once again, the acting USIP president. So here's the contact information for that person so that the MPD members could speak directly with him, and they went ahead and did it. MPD members met with the acting USIP president, and he provided the MPD members with documentation that he was the acting USIP president. By the way, check the paperwork on that. Always check the paperwork. As it turns out, probably the executive order naming that person the acting president of USIP was illegal, but, the cops aren't there to adjudicate that. Anyway, he presented the MPD members with documentation that he was the acting USIP president with all powers delegated by the USIP board of directors to that role. The acting USIP president advised MPD members, this is still cop talk, that there were unauthorized individuals inside the building that were refusing to leave and refusing to provide him with access to the facility. MPD members went to the USIP building and contacted an individual who allowed MPD members inside of the building. Once inside of the building, the acting USIP president requested that all the unauthorized individuals inside of the building leave. Eventually, all the unauthorized individuals inside the building complied with the acting USIP president's request and left the building without further incident, and no arrests were made. Well, that doesn't explain really, the legality or questionable legality of the appointment or any of that stuff, but that's outside the purview of, probably outside the purview of this article and outside the purview of the MPD as well, but it helps explain how the cops got there and how it was that they became convinced that their job was to eject the people who worked there and who owned the building and who owned the land that the building sits on, and hand things over to this other weirdo, whoever he may be. I don't know who the acting USIP president actually is, by the way. Is that in the CNN article anywhere? Just sort of wondering who it is that thinks that they are in charge over there. And it's not entirely clear. I'm going to skim the CNN piece here and say, is Kenneth Jackson is the name of the person who purports to be, that's all we can say, who purports to be the acting USIP president now. Why? Presumably an executive order at some point issued that claimed that was the case. Is that? Yeah. The administration, it says here in the CNN article, fired most of USIP's board on Friday. And again, it would be very helpful in delineating the processes here if news organizations did their job, but you could say it this way: do us the favor of, when there's some question about the legality of an executive order firing people and hiring new ones, you need to be saying, again, and there's no reason, we've advocated for this before, and there's no reason not to do it. It'll only make you look smart and prepared, and it doesn't mean anything is wrong if you say that the administration or that Donald Trump purported to have fired the board of USIP and purported to have named this other person acting USIP president, given that there are some real questions about the legality of these things, and that the record, the Trump administration's record in court and getting those things, those actions, firings and hirings upheld as legal has been pretty dismal. You can always, you say he purports to have done this, and if he wins in court, then events have borne him out. That's fine. There was nothing wrong with your having reported it as purportedly true. It was purported to be true, and it turned out to be true. You can still cover your bases by saying things are purported to be true, and then if Trump loses the case and they turn out not to be true, you didn't lie and you didn't get fooled. You made sure that everybody knows that there was still a question lingering around this and that the courts would settle it. So, all right. I mean, you could easily have said it this way. The administration purported to have fired most of USIP's board on Friday, and its three remaining members, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, and National Defense University President Peter Garvin, said that they were installing Kenneth Jackson as acting USIP president. Jackson was among the personnel who entered the building on Monday, according to the Institute's chief security officer. The real question is, who is Kenneth Jackson and why do we care about that? All right. Oh, and that, by the way, was the audio cue from, Greg, moving things over to the team chat. And it says that this is the preferred chat channel because it appears to be permanent and it shows tiles and is editable and you can find all the stuff that you're looking for. Okay, that seems reasonable. The only issue with that is that if you then do that after the show or during the show, it makes a lot of bleep noises until I can figure out how to get rid of those bleep noises. But you know what? What I can do now, since we're not actually talking, but you may be monitoring the discussion nonetheless, but because we're not talking on the air, I can go into audio hijack and I can turn off the volume from both Skype and Zoom US. And now if you send those things, it may make bloop noises, but the noises won't be broadcast. Oh, yes, they will. Unless they just happen in my ear and then don't go out over the system because I've turned down the system noise. All right. Well, what can you do? There's only so much you can make happen at any given time. And a couple of bloops on the air are a small price to pay for actually having the information that we need. Okay. All right. So still, by the way, out here as an issue is that although the team chat is permanent and then allows us to find things later, it's very difficult to find your way to the team chat while a meeting is ongoing. They really have to work on their interface over there at Zoom in order for me to approve. At any rate, time for us now to play our music pretty much and take a second break. We'll reorganize, and it sounds like now the bloops are not coming through. So we've managed that job. Oh, no, there's another one. One of the messages didn't produce a bloop. All right. At any rate, if you're hearing it, get used to it. We're just going to have to live with it. And I'm going to spend 2 minutes just trying to find out who is Keith Jackson and why did they name that Kenneth Jackson, sorry. And why did they name that guy as the, you know the words. Acting! Right, USIP president. We'll see if there's any answer about that next. Hi everybody, it's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and patreon.com, patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. All right, I was just taking a look around to see whether we could find out any information about this Kenneth Jackson fellow, and he's got a LinkedIn entry. Apparently he is, at least was, formerly a USAID person, which, although they claim to have closed USAID and fired almost everybody, they, I guess, decided that this guy was worth keeping in some role, and they made him the acting president of the USIP. I'm not certain why. That's still not clear. But, I guess he must have, kissed their asses enough and then begged for getting a job back. I can't believe you fired everybody at USAID. Some of us were totally willing to be Trump sycophants and suck-ups like me. Kenneth Jackson, possibly. I don't know. And what are you going to do about that? We could have helped you out from the inside, but now we have no jobs. All right, well, here's what I can do for you. I will put you in charge of USIP. And, apparently a guy who had made a career at a higher level at USAID that they thought would be appropriate to move over to there. In the meantime, the USIP board is suing, of course. And my first hit here on Kenneth Jackson, trying to find out something about him, is somebody, who is this? The White House Deputy Press Secretary, Anna Kelly, putting out the propaganda claim from the White House saying that George Moose is not the president of USIP anymore because he was, and I guess here, this is their claim, so that's why it doesn't say purportedly. He was removed from his position on March 14th, and Kenneth Jackson was appointed acting president. George Moose is actually, as Anna Kelly from the White House has it, a career bureaucrat who wants to be unaccountable to the American people. Well, he doesn't want to be unaccountable to the American people. He just wants you to be accountable to the American people. The Trump administration, as they say, won't let him. There is a reproduction of a document that purports to be, and we never know with paperwork from these guys, A resolution of the Board of Directors for the USIP noting the removal of George E. Moose as president and the appointment of Kenneth Jackson as acting president. And all the right-looking citations are made here, pointing to the purported authority of the purported Board of Directors to remove him. The only question is, are these guys actually on the Board of Directors, and do they represent a majority, and did they follow procedure for, proper procedure for the adoption of this resolution? That we don't know, and you can't tell from this paperwork, and you know how I feel about Trump and paperwork. But it's a piece of paper that purports to be a resolution executing this order, signed by Pete Garvin, president of the National Defense University and member of USIP's Board of Governors, allegedly. Same here with Pete Hegseth, you know who he is, and he is said to be a member of the board, and so does Marco Rubio. I would guess that the Secretary of Defense and Secretary of State might be ex officio members of the USIP board. Don't know what Pete Garvin's claim to it is, but he may have been appointed to the job, maybe even legally and properly, by Donald Trump, though you never know. And in the meantime, the three of them purport to speak for the board. It might be a 200-member board for all I know, and 3 members isn't enough to do anything. Maybe yes, maybe no. But their claim is that the USIP Board of Directors may appoint the agency's president under 22 U.S. Code Section 4606A. And then it's a resolution then says, therefore, I guess, be it resolved then, as of March 14th, George E. Moose is removed from his position. Kenneth Jackson is in, and we'll see whether any of that holds up. By the way, just out of curiosity, 22 U.S. Code Section 4606A. Just, with these guys, you never know. And what if it has nothing whatsoever to do with the United States Institute of Peace? You might as well go and check. I mean, you got every reason to believe that they could get that right, but you never know. And just out of curiosity, I thought I would type it in. 22 U.S. Code Section 4606, and we're talking about A, officers and employees. Are we in? Does it tell us the title of where we are? And no, but whatever it is, it seems to be about the composition of a board. The question is, I guess I have to look back further to see what are we talking about here. Here we are. So 22 U.S. Code Section 4603 establishes the United States Institute of Peace. So it is statutory. There is hereby established the United States Institute of Peace. There are restrictions. It is an independent nonprofit corporation and an organization described in Section 170C2B of Title 26. Well, let's take a look. It's linked. That C2B, is that right? These describes charitable trusts of some kind here. Well, let me scroll to the top here. 26 U.S. Code Section 170, charitable, etc., contributions and gifts. All right, but that doesn't seem to be. So what are we looking at here? The specific citation says we're talking about something that has been organized and operated exclusively for religious, charitable, scientific, literary, or educational purposes, or to foster national or international amateur sports competitions, but only if no part of its activities involve the provision of athletic facilities or equipment, or for the prevention of cruelty to children or animals. Wow. Okay. I mean, this is difficult to tell whether they have things correct here, but the United States Institute of Peace, I guess, exists by virtue of those things being recognizable charitable organizations. The Institute does not have any power to issue any shares of stock or declare or pay any dividends. Then Section C here is about the establishment and functions of an endowment for the United States Institute of Peace, liability for acts within the scope of its authority, trade name and trademark rights vested, all sorts of other interesting things here. But then getting back to there's a section here on the powers and duties of the Institute. The Institute may exercise the powers conferred upon a nonprofit corporation by the District of Columbia Nonprofit Corporation Act, consistent with this chapter, except for Section 5.0 of the District of Columbia Nonprofit Corporation Act. Don't know anything about that one. But yeah, now this is basically a description of, okay, so what the hell is this institute anyway? There's a very lengthy recitation of what its job responsibilities are and the various things that it can do. Now, on the board of directors, the board shall consist of 15 voting members as follows. So we know about 3 of the members who are likely ex officio officers. At least 2 of them are probably ex officio. The Secretary of State and Department of Defense. The board shall consist of 15 voting members. We know about the positions of 3 of them, on George Moose being ousted and Kenneth Jackson being moved in. But what about the rest? First up, the Secretary of State, or if the Secretary so designates another officer of the Department of State who is appointed with the advice and consent of the Senate. That hasn't happened, but Secretary of State is confirmed. That's Marco Rubio. The Secretary of Defense is on it. Same conditions for him. Third, the President of the National Defense University. That's, what's his face? Who we were looking at before. Dang, what happened to that one? I think that was, the ex-post. So he's the president. That's Peter Garvin, United States National Defense University. Did we read that right? Okay. So where were we here? National Defense University president, right? Okay. Number 4 on the list here. 12 other individuals who will be appointed by the president by and with the advice and consent of the Senate. So the question is whether or not any of those people were duly appointed by Donald Trump. And then I guess next question is whether yes or no. There's no evidence in the resolution displayed by the deputy press secretary here on Twitter that anybody else was involved in this vote. There's a resolution of the board of directors and no report on the vote totals, if any. I mean, it could be that, all of the members of the board acceded to this thing, but it should say so in the resolution. All it says is, whereas the board may remove the agency's president under their claimed interpretation of the statute, and whereas the board of directors may appoint a new agency president under the similar statutory authority, be it resolved that as of March 14th, Moose is removed and Jackson designated as, acting president with all the powers delegated by the board of directors to that role, and then a certification attested to by Garvin, Hegseth, and Rubio, but no indication of there having been a vote held or a majority of the board registering their approval of that. So, paperwork problem. I know this is all on paper and it's signed and it's got letterhead, but is that enough? Well, we'll find out. As it turns out, the United States Institute of Peace Board is suing after firings and dodgy staff access to the headquarters. Let's see what's going on. This is reported by local10.com, which Channel 10 is, are we talking about where is this? Is this, this isn't a DC channel, but is, somebody else. So what is I hate when they don't identify right up top exactly who, why not put the city name where you're mostly based? What is the weather report? So you have to click on the weather report and see where it's Miami, Florida. So there you go. It's, I'm sure, a wire story that's being run by, for whatever reason, okay, there we are. Talia Beatty of the Associated Press, responsible for the story. Thank you, finally, for telling me. The United States Institute of Peace and many of its board members have sued the Trump administration, seeking to prevent their removal and stop Elon Musk's Dodgy from taking over and accessing the building and systems of the independent nonprofit. The lawsuit filed late Tuesday in U.S. District Court in Washington describes the lengths that the Institute staff resorted to, including calling the police, though it turns out it's interesting that they still maintain that they called the police. And it may be the case that both USIP people and the United States Attorney's Office both called the police. That could still be true. But all of this effort, or rather all of this done in an effort to prevent dodgy representatives and others working with the Trump administration from accessing the headquarters near the State Department. An executive order last month from Donald Trump targeted, and it's important that they say, Republican President Donald Trump targeted the Institute and 3 other agencies for large-scale reductions. The think tank, they consider themselves a think tank, which seeks to prevent and resolve conflicts, which is ironic given what's going on, was created and funded by Congress in 1984. Board members are nominated by the president and must be confirmed by the Senate, and I don't know whether that's happened or not. The lawsuit accuses the White House of illegal firings by email and said the remaining board members, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, Marco Rubio, of course, and NDU President Peter Garvin, also ousted the Institute's president, George Moose. In his place, the 3 appointed Kenneth Jackson, an administrator with the USAID. According to the lawsuit, dodgy staff tried multiple times to access the building on Monday before successfully getting in, partly with police assistance. The lawsuit says the Institute's lawyer told dodgy representatives multiple times that the executive branch has no authority over the nonprofit. The White House did not immediately respond to a request for comment about the lawsuit. The legal action is the latest, challenging the Trump administration's efforts to dismantle U.S. foreign assistance agencies, reduce the size of the federal government, and exert control over entities created by Congress. It's also noted along the way here, a federal judge ruled on Tuesday that cuts to USAID likely violated the Constitution, and he blocked dodgy staff from making further ones. I guess there's still a core of USAID that still exists. But yes, that also widely circulated yesterday, and I was looking forward to seeing some of the write-ups on it today, but they probably are out there, and I haven't parked them, and we will find that we are without time to get to them. But yes, widely circulated on social media yesterday, a very broadly written and stinging rebuke, I guess, from, again, one federal judge who likewise will be threatened with impeachment, I'm sure. If it's not the same person, I'm pretty sure it's not. But this person will also be subject to these kinds of threats from the administration because they said, look, this whole thing that they did to USAID and likely to other agencies, all illegal and contrary to the appointments clause of the Constitution. It's all unconstitutional, and it all needs to be undone. The leaders of 2 of the other agencies listed in Trump's February executive order, the Inter-American Foundation, which invests in businesses in Latin America and the Caribbean, and the U.S. African Development Foundation, the other place that they resisted dodgy incursion, have also sued the administration to undo or pause the removal of most of their staff and cancellation of most of their contracts. A federal judge ruled last week it would be illegal to remove most contracts and staff from the U.S. Africa Agency, which invested millions of dollars in African small businesses, but the judge also ordered the government to prepare dodgy staff to explain what steps they were taking to maintain the agency at the minimum presence and function required by law. That would be the language taken from the executive order. A White House spokesperson, Anna Kelly, has said in response to the U.S. Africa Foundation case that, quote, entitled rogue bureaucrats have no authority to defy Trump's executive orders or physically bar his representatives from entering the agencies they run, even though the agencies don't fall under the executive branch, apparently. So the suits are, slowly winding their way through the system. And yeah, well, here, this one links to the AP's report on the latest decision that I just mentioned. The judge rules that dodgy's USAID dismantling likely violates the Constitution and in just any number of ways. That's the snippet I saw being circulated on social media yesterday. Lindsay Whitehurst and Michael Kunzelman are the AP reporters on this piece. The dismantling of the USAID by billionaire Elon Musk's dodgy likely violated the Constitution, a federal judge ruled Tuesday, as he indefinitely blocked Dodgy from making further cuts to the agency. This applies directly to USAID. The order requires the Trump administration to restore email and computer access to all employees of USAID, including those put on administrative leave, though it stops short of reversing firings or fully resurrecting the agency. That's a bit disappointing, I'm sure. But the wheels do turn slowly. Let's see. In one of the first dodgy lawsuits against Musk himself, the first, I saw this reported yesterday too, that this is the first one that purports to constrain Musk from acting. U.S. District Judge, ready for your next impeachment threat, Theodore Chuang, I guess, maybe Chuang, Chuang, Theodore Chuang in Maryland, rejected the Trump administration's position that Musk is merely President Donald Trump's advisor. He's cutting through this nonsense. And stop telling me he's not in charge of Dodgy. Musk's public statements and social media posts demonstrate that he has, quote, firm control over Dodgy, the judge found, pointing to an online post where Musk said he had, quote, fed USAID into the wood chipper. Yeah, that should come back to haunt you. The judge said it's likely that USAID is no longer capable of performing some of its statutorily required functions. Taken together, these facts support the conclusion that USAID has been effectively eliminated, Chuang wrote in the preliminary injunction. The lawsuit filed by USAID employees and contractors argued that Musk and Dodgy are wielding power the Constitution reserves only for those who win elections or are confirmed by the Senate. And, of course, neither of those two things has happened for Musk. Their attorneys said the ruling effectively halts or reverses many of the steps taken to dismantle the agency. The administration has said that Dodgy is searching for and rooting out waste, fraud, and abuse in the federal government, consistent with the campaign message, not that that matters, that helped Trump win the 2024 election. The White House and Dodgy did not immediately respond to requests for comment on the ruling. Musk, his team, and Trump political appointee Pete Marocco, Marocco, it's not Morocco, but Marocco. Is that how it's pronounced? I don't know. They have played a central role in the 2-month dismantling of USAID. In one instance in early February, the administration placed the agency's top security officials on forced leave after they tried to block Dodgy workers from accessing USAID's classified and sensitive documents. The administration, with Musk and Dodgy's support, went on to order all but a fraction of the agency's staffers off the job through forced leaves and firings, and terminated what the State Department said was at least 83% of USAID's program contracts. The moves were part of a broader push by Musk and the Trump administration to eradicate the 6-decade-old Foreign Assistance Agency and most of its work overseas. I think we know most of the background on all of this. But just as a reminder, Trump on Inauguration Day issued an executive order directing a freeze of foreign assistance funding and a review of all U.S. aid and development work abroad, charging that much of foreign assistance was wasteful and advanced the liberal agenda. Democratic lawmakers and other supporters of USAID have argued Trump had no authority to withhold funding that Congress had already approved. That's that too, a constitutional objection. Chuang said Dodgy's and Musk's fast-moving destruction of USAID likely harmed the public interest by depriving elected lawmakers of their constitutional authority to decide whether, when, and how to close down an agency created by Congress. That makes sense. Congress makes it, they can dismantle it, but they haven't done so. The lawsuit was filed by the State Democracy Defenders Fund. Norm Eisen, the nonprofit's executive chair, said the ruling is a milestone in pushback to Dodgy and the first to find that Musk's actions violate the Constitution's Appointments Clause, which mandates presidential approval and Senate confirmation for certain public officials. They are performing surgery with a chainsaw instead of a scalpel. That's true too, and they are proud to have done so, harming not just the people USAID serves, but the majority of Americans who count on the stability of our government, he said in a statement. Oxfam America's Abby Maxman said in a statement, urged all staffing and funding to be reinstated. The funding freeze and program cuts are already having life or death consequences for millions around the world, said the chief executive of the humanitarian group. All right, so we're up to speed on the most broad description of what the judge said. And people were circulating snippets from the decision itself and linking to the entirety of the opinion. I assume that this was all factually based and they weren't manufacturing quotes from this thing. But I didn't check it out myself. I was waiting for some of the write-ups just so we could touch on the broad spectrum of what happened. But people were very impressed with the pointedness of the ruling. And of course, the administration position is no single federal judge can do that to us, except, when they want that to be done. No problem doing it to Biden administration policy, but somehow not available as against the Trump administration in their view. So, also, I guess, of some interest, just because I like digging into these things and unwinding some of these stories in detail, because that's what you should be doing. And it means we don't get to some other things, but I don't know. I think that that's kind of what we do here, and it's important to get done. So what we haven't seen is what has happened to the other 12 members of the board of the USIP. And I assume that at some point somewhere along the line, perhaps Trump is under the impression, or that he purported to have fired the other 12 members of the board, and they may be suing for their own reinstatement. But it's not clear. Here's the executive order targeting the institute, but does it target them directly, or is this just? I don't know. Well, it looks like it's broader than just the USIP, but this is commencing the reduction of the federal bureaucracy February 19th, and here's where they're named: reducing the scope of the federal bureaucracy. The non-statutory components and functions of the following governmental entities shall be eliminated to the maximum extent consistent with applicable law, and such entities shall reduce the performance of their statutory functions and associated personnel to the minimum presence and function required by law. And this is the one that names the Presidio Trust, the Inter-American Foundation, the United States African Development Foundation, and the United States Institute of Peace. And let's see, within 14 days of the date of this order, the head of each unnecessary governmental entity listed in subsection A shall submit a report to the Director of the Office of Management and Budget, confirming compliance with this order and stating whether the governmental entity or any components of functions thereof are statutorily required and to what extent. So, I don't know. It basically goes on, I guess. What it doesn't answer is, you see the language that he's using to cover himself. Well, you see, we'll remain legal in all this if we just say you're reduced to the minimum number of employees that might be statutorily required. And given that the statute establishes the board of directors as having 15 members, I guess the question is whether there's anything that would support the idea that three ex officio members of the board, the Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense, and the President of the National Defense University, do they constitute a quorum of the board? So, unclear here is all the board fired, where they might think, well, under the February 19th order reducing you to the minimum statutorily required, you are all fired. But, ordinarily under general parliamentary law, a majority, at least a simple majority of the board might be required for a quorum, which would mean out of the 15, 8. So there should be at least 5 other members who might have a vested interest in opposing the dodgy takeover and would probably have outvoted the ex officio members, but they're not mentioned anywhere. So that too has to be settled. Now we have to find out in court, were the other 12 fired? Were they all fired? Were they fired with, the proper authority? And if not, then the document that they showed to the Metropolitan Police Department in order to eject either George Moose or his representative from the building was invalid. Not that that was likely within the purview of the MPD to verify on their own, but they could have asked for legal counsel on this one, I suppose. But yeah, I mean, this is just the level of complication that this is, that's operative behind all of these things. And, you can see very easily where normies might very well be distracted by the complexity of all and throw up their hands and just say, this is something I can't deal with. Certainly it's not something that police on the spot are likely to be able to deal with very easily, but it's working itself out in the courts slowly. And, we found out with his election cases, it turns out that he's losing most of these government restructuring cases in court as well. Whether or not the rulings can take effect is, I guess, another question to be answered another day. And I guess we'll have to pursue the rest of this on another day, given that we have reached the end of the show. But somewhere along the line also, and I should have put aside who had sent this one to me, but did Matthew Rigdon send me this one? Urban Legends and a Media Ecosphere, an explainer in PirateWireServices.com of just what is Tren de Aragua anyway, and is it really the gang that the Trump administration claims it is, or is it something made up or exaggerated for the purpose of getting to their desired ends? Well, so far, all indications are it is the latter rather than the former. Anyway, time now for us to hand things over to Justice Putnam for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, coming up next, right here on Netroots Radio. Stay tuned.
NetrootsRadio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
Well, as luck would have it, that lead story for Justice is also that big landmark court case that we were just discussing. Now the question, will they ignore it anyway? On the rest of the menu, real federal auditors say dodgy's takeover of whole agencies is a heist. And, hey, there's more about Tesla as well, and you'll always want to stay tuned for that.